When will Skynet be fully operational? Written a dramatic forecast suggesting that by 2027, some kind of machine god may be with us.
Is ChatGPT?
No, ChatGPT is not the Antichrist. Far from it.
James Poulter is a thought leader at the intersection of faith and technology.
He's dedicated to helping Christian organizations embrace AI while staying true to their values.
Any pitfalls and downfalls and lessons to learn?
And I was being thrown into these big pitches, working with big brands, getting to fly around the world. I think I probably got too big for my boots.
What do you think the future holds for AI?
Add to the ability for you to have a virtual girlfriend or a virtual boyfriend and be totally happy with that.
I want young people across the country to feel that they are better looked after by having a real friend than a synthetic friend. That people who are suffering with mental health issues can go to a real person who can help them with those issues rather than a synthetic one.
Welcome to Faith Off the Record. I'm here today with an exciting guest, JP, also known as James Poulter. As some of you may know, he's an internationally well-known, recognised figure that talks about technology, AI, former background in marketing, agency, here to share his insights from a Christian perspective, as well as his faith in action. Be blessed and enjoy. JP, welcome to Faith Off the Record. Thank you very much for being here and blessing us with your presence. You're an infamous person, both online, someone that we've known very much and closely watched over the course of time. And really an honor to have you and share insights behind all that you do as a speaker, as someone in the tech business and in AI. And please, would love to go into this in more detail with you and talk about your journey in faith, how that's impacted your life, and not just that, from your business acumen and your personal development. So JP, welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us, Joel. Yeah, and thanks for that intro. It's a pleasure to be here. It's one of those opportunities where you think about this stuff in your personal life all the time, but having the chance to walk it out with somebody is always appreciated.
Fantastic. So let's go into it, JP, and how about you just set the scene in terms of just give a bit of your background, tell us about who you are in terms of what you're known for, and then more importantly, we'd love to hear about your faith and how you came to the faith.
Yeah, sure. So I'm James Poulter. Everyone knows me as JP, at least online, and I've had an interesting background, I suppose, in the world of communications and marketing and crossing over into the technology space. Professionally, for the past 18 years or so, I've worked in a variety of different places, both agency side and also in-house at companies like the Lego Group, as well as also agencies like Ogilvy and Edelman. And I now lead the AI and innovation team at House 337 in London, which is a global communications company where we focus on making brands famous, building progressive brands, which for us means brands that want to do good in the world through the mixture of humanity and technology. And that's what I spend a lot of my time doing on the commercial front. And then I've always had this strand, I suppose, throughout my career and life of working in and around the church or parachurch ecosystem with Christian startups, with denominations like the Church of England, with apps and organizations that have tried to enter into the faith tech space, more recently with people like Glue in the US, and originally helping YouVersion launch the Bible app in the UK about 15 years ago. So I had an opportunity to do lots of different things in that space because I've always believed that we need to bring the best of what I've learned in the commercial world into the faith-driven ecosystem, and then also try and represent the ethics and morals of the Christian faith into the commercial space wherever there's an opportunity to do so. And so I've tried to tread that line throughout my career.
That's fantastic, and really excited to hear about the YouVersion, and keen to go into that a bit later on. But foremost, talk about your family, your upbringing. What was that like? Yeah, you as a child, did you always have a tech savviness behind you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in southwest London, in Kingston, and I was always fascinated with media, I would say, in the broadest sense.
Technology more specifically as I learn more about it. Ever since a young age, my grandfather, Reg, was a cameraman at the BBC for his entire career. He worked on some of the earliest shows like Doctor Who and Top of the Pops, Porridge, Only Fools and Horses, and many others. And so that kind of familiarity with media, television, radio was always around us. I grew up listening to old radio comedies on vinyl and on cassettes in the evenings, things like Sorry, I Haven't a Clue and Just a Minute and these types of programs that we still have on Radio 4, and watching comedy, things like Monty Python and The Goon Show and some of these kind of early BBC radio and TV comedies. And that was what fascinated me about the power of language and the power to communicate through the spoken word. And my faith journey didn't really begin until I was in my teens working, and I was going to a regular youth group on a Friday night run by a local church in Southwest London, Hook Church in the Surbiton area. And I just came amongst this group of people that I thought they had something different about them. Somehow they seemed to be happier. They seemed to be better able to maintain relationships. They didn't let arguments go on longer than they needed to. And sure, I'd probably showed up at the youth club for like girls, basketball and sweets in that order, and stuck around for that. But the thing that then also came into my life was my experience of the gospel message and coming to know Jesus. And through that, there was always something in me that knew I wanted to meet these two gifts of communication and later, the technological space. I was always interested in gadgets and tools and things, and know that there's a real opportunity for us to use technology to communicate the gospel. And so as I went into university, I went to study radio broadcasting at University of Westminster, and spent a lot of time in front of these things, in front of microphones, doing podcasts before they were really a thing. And had an opportunity there to really kind of bring those two things together, working in Christian radio, starting the first Christian podcast at my university, and then going on to teach that and begin to work with Christians doing podcasting in around like 2015, 2016. So quite early in the podcasting space.
Yeah.
The rest is history, really.
Yeah. I want to know about, as you were sort of growing up, and that's a great summary in terms of your journey. What was it like? Did you come from a Christian background? Did you knew about faith beforehand? Was faith always there in sort of the back of your brain?
I would say I didn't come from a non-Christian home, but it wasn't really an active part of our upbringing. But my grandparents were both believers. In fact, my grandfather I mentioned actually came to be confirmed in the Church of England when he was in his 70s, I think it was. I went to his confirmation service, which is probably an odd thing to see someone, your grandfather getting confirmed much later in life. So I think I always had a familiarity with it. I went to a school that had kind of Christian morals and values, and we would go at Christmas and Easter and we would hear the stories, but it wasn't really an active part of my life until that kind of teenage phase. And when I did then come to faith, I think it was something that we had to work through and understand, because it wasn't a part of my day-to-day experience. I started wanting to go to church on a Sunday. My parents, I don't think, really understood what that meant, but they were very supportive of it in those early days, because I think they were glad I was wanting to do that rather than running around on the streets or riding my bike off into the woods with other kids of my age. And it became part of my life. But I'd say it wasn't really part of my upbringing specifically. It was though when I went off to university that's where I think my faith went from something that I knew in my head and I think I believed logically to something that I really experienced personally. Joining a church in central London, meeting my now wife at the time, who also wasn't a believer either, but seeing her come to faith, participating in courses like Alpha and things like that at university. That was where I began to understand what the Holy Spirit really meant and how he working through us can really change things.
What led you to that?
When I moved to London, I had friends who were going to a church in Marylebone, and we had an opportunity to kind of go along together. I was looking for a church because I'd moved from Southwest London and was living away from home. And there was just something about this group of people that I think I recognized in that early moment of coming to faith again, of here's a group of people that are seeing more of what can be done in the Spirit, that God moves now. It's not just something that's on the pages of this very old book, which I was really fascinated by and absolutely believed at the time, but wasn't something that really changed the way in which I experienced what it meant to know God on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it was through that process of learning how to lead worship, learning how to be a part of a community of people that would come together more regularly and more pray deeply and experience the Spirit moving amongst us.
Yeah.
that was what really changed it for me.
You mentioned the word belief, and that's very important because that's what stems a lot of everything. What does that mean to you in terms of that vocabulary, both from a faith perspective as well as professionally?
Yeah. Belief, I think, is one of those words that is often misunderstood. And we believe in all sorts of things throughout life. We believe in our parents and what they mean to us often. So obviously some people's visions of their parents get broken down very early. But many of us go through life believing in things. So in work, we have beliefs. We believe in, kind of the team and the leader, and those things can fall apart too. But when it comes to my faith life, belief has always been the thing that we choose to embrace, sometimes in spite of the evidence. There are so many things we all go through where we're not going to have an answer for everything, and we can't just read in the Bible and have a direct answer for it either. Whether that's personal tragedy or difficult circumstances or decisions that just don't seem to go our way and we can't make an understanding of. But we choose to believe because even though we don't necessarily have logical evidence for it, we have an experience. And belief, I think, is something that we need to see more of. And I think you could interchange maybe belief in the word trust quite regularly. Is that seems to have been something that has been really broken for many of us in society, is that trust. Who do we trust? What do we trust in? And that's not just about the facts of the matter, but it's whether or not we feel trust in someone. And so it's about empathy, and it's also about, belief.
Yeah. Have you ever doubted your faith?
I think there's been times where my faith has felt more distant. There's been times where I felt absolutely the closeness of God in difficulty and tragedy. But I don't think I've ever doubted in the sense that I suddenly feel like I don't believe that what I have come to believe is true anymore. But I certainly think the nuances of it have changed for me over the years. I think in my early faith, as many people often are, you discover the Bible and you're just devouring all the stories and you're trying to kind of ratify them and make sense of them in your own life. And then as time goes by, life happens to you, and that's the thing that often shakes your understanding of maybe that's like more dogmatic initial first love of this story and what it means to know Jesus. But I don't think I've ever doubted that Jesus is real, or that his resurrection was a real thing, or that his spirit moves amongst us. But there's certainly been times where I've doubted aspects of the Christian faith, or what I think these different parts of it might mean, certainly on kind of issues that relate to more societal issues over time. And I think that's natural. I think we all go through that. And in fact, it would be unnatural if you didn't, because Jesus welcomes people in to ask questions. That was what he did, right? He asked questions all the time of people. And so if we're to model after him, then we should also be questioning things all the time, but we're never to step away entirely from our fundamental belief.
No, that's really important. I think it's very clear. I want to now talk to you about sort of the transition from you're in university, you've been exposed and getting some media training, and tell us about your breakthrough in terms of how then that propelled you into your career.
So my breakthrough story, or how I kind of entered into my work life professionally, has a very direct trace to a single person, which I'm very, very thankful for. Those watching or listening might know of Rory Sutherland, who's the vice president of Ogilvy, very famous behavioral psychologist, or advertising man. He is the ad man, and it was Rory that got me into my advertising career. I was doing a podcast in the early 2000s, about 2005, and it was just at the dawn of Facebook becoming available for brands to work with, so you could start a Facebook page for a company. I mean, we take this for granted now, right, that brands and companies would have social media presences, but at the time this was completely revolutionary. And Facebook had only just come out of being something that university students could access, right? You had to have a university email address to get on Facebook originally. And so I went to interview Rory Sutherland at Ogilvy. I managed to get hold of his email address. I'd seen him speak somewhere, and I asked if I would come and visit with him for 20 minutes. I would just interview him about this thing for the podcast, and I would put it into this magazine show that I was editing at the time. Well, anyway, about an hour and a half later, after I had spent an hour and a half with Rory in his office in Canary Wharf, We had talked about everything related to Facebook and social media and technology and these new apps and speakers that he was interested in, all sorts of stuff. And I came away from that experience just excited that even a thing like an advertising agency existed. This was before Mad Men was on TV, right? Like most people who weren't in advertising didn't know what an advertising agency even did. And some days I wake up and I'm still not quite sure what we do. But I had spent this time with him, and I thought this is fascinating. This is where I think I want to spend my time, where I can bring these things together of technology and communications and change people's mind about things, just through creating media. And so a few weeks later, I emailed Rory back and I said, Rory, I don't know if this podcasting thing is going to work for me. It's too soon. I had a couple of shows, but it was going to be hard to make it commercially viable. This is 20 years ago, right? This was before this stuff became normal. And I said to Rory, like, would you mind setting me up with a couple of interviews at Ogilvy? Which is like a totally preposterous thing to ask someone who's so senior in their kind of role. But Rory, being the man he is, he did exactly that. He set me up with 2 interviews with 2 different department heads within Ogilvy. The first one looked at me like I had 2 heads and knew nothing about what he was asking me to do and sent me packing. But the second one, a chap called Ricky Vasquez, who I owe a lot of things to for that early stage, said, yeah, we'll give you a try. And so he brought me in for 2 weeks work experience. And 2 weeks later, they decided they wanted to start a social media team in this agency. And they gave me the job to set it up. I was 21. I knew nothing about how to run social media teams or how to do any of this stuff. But they gave me a shot. And so 3 weeks later, after I'd started, I was properly on the payroll. They sent me to Washington, DC for a week to go and train with a chap called John Bell, who was running the global, what was called a digital influence practice at the time. And I spent a week learning how we were going to run this program with 5 other people from 5 other offices around the world. And I came back to London and we got cracking. And we started building this team and started helping brands understand what it meant to use social media. And that set me on a trajectory of working in the agency world for the next 9 or so years, and then on into brands and doing what I do now.
Wow. Any pitfalls and downfalls and lessons to learn during this time that you recollect and come to mind specifically?
Yeah, I think the thing is, when you get early success like that, or someone validates you in what it is that you suddenly want to do, some people start telling you, wow, isn't it amazing that you know how to do this and I don't? And I was literally sitting in rooms with people who are 20 years my senior who had no idea what I was talking about when it came to Twitter and blogging and YouTube and social media. And again, we take this for granted now, but just rewind 20 years ago when this was not a normal thing to be talking about. I think I probably got too big for my boots, to be honest. And so I was there for a couple of years. And I was being thrown into these big pitches, working with big brands, getting to fly around the world, go and do different work with Volvo and IBM and Mattel and all these kind of interesting brands, Unilever, people like that. And I thought, I know what I'm talking about here. I know I can go and do this anywhere. I saw a job for a digital director at some other agency, and I was like, it was a big pay bump, and I can go and do this. And so I applied, and I walked in, and I got the job, and because they didn't know anyone else that could do it, and I bit off way more than I could chew. I landed into that new place, having let go of this great team, great opportunity I'd been given, and I was at the next job for 6 months at most. And it was very obvious to me and obvious to them that I didn't know all of the things that went along with not just the technical skills that I had learned, but how to be with people and how to manage money and all the stuff that you actually need to learn to run a business well, as you well know. That stuff I had still a long way to go. And so, I think that's often the challenge that I've seen other people kind of go through when you get early success in something. One aspect of life is validating who you are. You latch onto it, of course, because it's confirmation bias. But the lesson is to, try and grow wholeheartedly in the round, right? Not just kind of in one particular trait. And for me, I think that was the real pitfall. And so I stepped back from that role, went and found something at a different agency that was a bit more earlier, a bit more stable, and then started regrowing from there. But I take that lesson all the time.
What would be your advice to someone who may be listening now, who may be in a similar position, as to that moment of, I feel too big for my boots? Because we know peaking too early, you can land you into trouble. But knowing the right time, any guidance on that, from your perspective?
I mean, I often think about the the parable of the talents, which is, Jesus gives this example, right, of the father that kind of gives these talents to these different brothers, and they go off and invest it. And one of them, he buries it in the sand, comes back, and then, the father asks him, like, what did you do with what I gave you? And he I always think that when comes back to the father, it's not that he's actually convicted that he had done the right thing, that he had buried this in the sand, and that, like, he was just protecting the investment. That's what he says, right? He says to the father, oh yeah, I put this money away. I was trying to keep it safe for you. I think he's bluffing in that moment, right? I think he's going, oh yeah, of course, that was what I meant. I always meant to do this. I meant to put it in the sand.
I've never heard of that one.
Aren't I clever? Aren't I clever? I put it in the sand, Father. Don't you think I'm smart? Look at these other brothers. They were risky. They went off and risked everything. I think he's bluffing in that moment. And the thing that he should have been doing in that moment is coming clean, which is not to say, oh, no, Dad, I didn't do this right. It should have been like, Dad, I didn't know what to do with this. I didn't have the tenacity. I didn't have the ideas. I didn't have the creativity to go and work with this. I should have come and asked you at the time. Or better yet, give it back and say, Dad, I don't know what to do with this. That's the advice I would give to people. When you find yourself outside of your depth, the sooner you're able to come to the person that's giving you that responsibility to say, thank you so much for this honor, but I'm not worthy of it right now. I don't know where to go. Most people will see that and want to step in and help you.
Wow.
Right? Most people will want to lean and go, oh, okay, well, let's do this together. Or, okay, no problem, I'll take it back and wait till you're ready. But that's far better than hiding it away for 6 months, coming back and someone asking you, saying, what have you done with it? And you bluff your way through the answer. So I think that's the lesson I take from it is, when you're out of your depth, acknowledge it. Because we'll all find ourselves out of our depth at some point or other. And the person that gave you that responsibility had that moment at some point in their career too. And so the quicker that you own up to that, the quicker that someone can recognize that in you.
Well, no, that's fantastic. I've never heard of the parable in such a way, and it's really revelatory. That understanding and that business acumen side. But I want to now see how you're coming to that place again, which is, elevating your role. You're coming into now great exposure with brands and working in these, really skyrocketing your career. Where does this position your faith then as part of that process? Have you got the faith? Have you sort of held on to the faith? And has there been an opportunity for you to, spend time in the faith, given these decision and wisdoms? And how are you being led in your now phase of career moment?
I think I've always tried to represent my faith publicly, and it be a core part of who I am. I mean, it is a core part of who I am. Of course it is. And so during that time of, you're growing in influence, you're growing in awareness, social media in particular raises this challenge of like, will you be open about what you believe in these different circumstances? I've always tried to just represent myself, I suppose, as fully as I can. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm a business person. Yes, I'm a dad. Yes, I'm a husband. These things come as a package. You don't get to compartmentalize. And so that does mean that sometimes you have to kind of make the tough decision, or be the one that's going to stand up and say, I don't think we should do things that way, and this is why. And that will root back to, a fundamental, it's not always about preaching a Bible story in the middle of a meeting, or, kind of taking the Bible into the boardroom, so to speak. But it is about, representing the ethics that you hold, from a position of values, and those values come from my Christian worldview, as they do for many people, whether they represent them or not, whether they recognize them or not. We all have an ethical, moral framework and value, and I think, as Tom Holland in Dominion talks about this idea of that we all live within Christendom, and we can't kind of get rid of that. And so actually, I think we're seeing this confidence now of people actually being willing to step up and say, no, actually, I do believe these things, and this is why. And I think for most of my earlier career, particularly working in the advertising agency world, which can be quite a hard place sometimes, a place that's very liberal, that's very embracing of all people, but at the same time is also a very hard environment to work in. It's fast paced, it's aggressive, it has tough deadlines, it means working hard, and it hasn't always done the best job over time of protecting people and their well-being, or prioritizing things like family. It's much better now, I must say. Yeah, there have been moments where I've had to say, I'm sorry guys, but I just can't do that this weekend. I have to be at church on Sunday. I've got this responsibility, or I'm going to a men's group, or I'm going to a small group on a Wednesday night. I can't work late on this pitch. I've got other responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I think there probably have been times at, different moments where maybe that's rubbed someone up the wrong way, or they've not understood it. But I've always tried to, again, be forthcoming with these things, because when you try and hide away from the fact that that's the reason why you're doing things, people then get the wrong impression as well. And so you want to balance that as best as you can.
No, I think you've said something again very important, which is when it comes to the word adapting. I think you're going to adapt also in the environment, and being in the faith. Sometimes saying no means because you don't want to compromise your faith,
right?
But also means that you have to say those hard no's. And that led me on to a question, which is, has it been a time that you recollect or recall where your faith has taken that precedence in terms of a decision? And especially for non-Christians, it could be rubbing them up the wrong way. But how do you navigate that in terms of ensuring your faith is not compromised, but yet doesn't rub someone?
When I started my business about 6 years ago, Vixen Labs, which was a conversational AI agency, so we were building applications predominantly for Alexa and Google Assistant. The role of who we work with shifted from something that one of my bosses would have decided to me and my co-founder deciding, right? What clients are we going to work with? What topics are off limits? And we had to really wrestle with some of the clients that we chose to take on. I mean, if you look far enough, there's a reason you could probably find to not work with anybody if you really wanted to try. So you have to make decisions about where those lines are, particularly things like working on products like gambling, for example, or media companies that maybe hold certain views. You have to bring a moral framework in to be able to make those decisions. And so there were occasions where we had to say, no, do you know what? We just don't feel comfortable with that. Or I didn't feel comfortable with that, or team members didn't. And we weren't a Christian company. We weren't a organization of entirely believers, but we did have several people who had faith in the company, including myself. And so it was one of those things where we had to explain, well, why do we feel this way? Like, other companies will do this. We might be leaving money on the table, right? And in business, you're going to get those decisions sometimes, and it's not always going to align with what necessarily the Bible might teach or what you think the Bible might teach. Sometimes that is just a matter of discernment. And, I'm glad that we have the Holy Spirit to help us in those moments, because it's not always obvious what the right decision is to make. And I'm sure I got it wrong on many occasions. I think that particularly has been one of the real challenges, is that when you choose to partner with someone, when you choose to take money from someone, or particularly from a marketing perspective, when you choose to put someone up on a pedestal or lift them up through advertising, promotion, marketing, you are partnering with them in some way. And you have to have a framework for how to decide when to do that.
Of course. Then just on the opposite side, which is, I'm sure it has a positive impact, where seeing someone like yourself in the workplace, meeting incredible people, incredible brands, any instances, any examples where your faith has really come alive and you felt led to share maybe the gospel, share your faith and how important your faith is, which has led on to someone being, wow, I never knew that, or encourage someone?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been really fortunate to do is work a lot in communities of practice and different disciplines, particularly through this emergent stage of artificial intelligence. As AI began to emerge in our first iteration of it with the voice technology stuff, I was part of various different conferences and events and traveling a lot between here and the US to go and participate in those things. And one of the things that we became aware of is that we needed to build like standards and governance models around how this stuff was going to grow and be implemented. And I was really keen to make sure that there was some Christian principles built into that stuff. I got to work with the Open Voice Foundation, who are the people that are part of the Linux network. They distribute Linux, the operating system. And we began to realize that there were a few of us that were also Christian people, also believing together. And we formed a collective. So we began to meet at this annual conference in Washington, D.C., and we would hold a prayer breakfast at this event. And we began to see people start showing up, some of them who weren't Christians, but just thought, yeah, actually, we agree that there should be some values and some morals and standards in the way in which this technology develops. And that's been such a blessing because we didn't have to do it with shouting from the rooftops or putting down some legislation or anything hard like that. But just through the faithful demonstration of prayer and of meeting together, doing church together essentially, but in not a community that was formed around at one location or one company even, but just through a shared set of interest and overlapping kind of groups. That's been really encouraging. And now I'm part of a fantastic, much broader network of Christians working in technology, both in the big tech companies as well as also in startups and entrepreneurship, where we get to regularly now come together and demonstrate what it means to have a faith. And we're creating the content and we're creating the outputs from these conferences and events now. I was just in Dallas a couple of weeks ago at Missional AI, which is the global summit that we're part of running, which looks at the missional uses of artificial intelligence. And those talks are going up on YouTube and they're going up on LinkedIn and they're being shared around the world, and they get just as much attention and views as the TED Talks I do or the commercial work that I do. And it gives you that opportunity to speak into places that otherwise you just wouldn't have an influence.
Oh, that's great. My brother-in-law is really heavy in his tech and loves tech. And obviously talking to people is sometimes always virtually a lot in the tech world. For someone like yourself who's into tech, who knows business, who knows marketing and agency work and all that good stuff, is there any nuggets that you've picked up during that time on how you can talk to people and share your faith and reach not your faith, but more broach your faith? Yeah.
I do a lot of public speaking. I love doing public speaking. It's the thing that I probably think I'm not necessarily best at, but certainly the thing that I enjoy the most. And one of the things that gives you opportunities is to tell stories and to tell and to communicate ideas to people. And, I think, as I say, people are becoming more accepting of the Bible and the stories of Jesus and the stories of the apostles. Again, I think we're seeing a real trend towards that. Great data in the past few weeks showing that there is this kind of quiet revival happening here in the UK. But long before that, I've always tried to build in stories where I can of people of faith or from the Bible. And you don't have to name that they're from the Bible. You don't have to be dropping, quotes and references and scriptural verses of which translation it came from. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. And of course that stuff is helpful and it name checks it. But the scriptures and the stories from church history are so rich in the stories of things like social justice, whether it's talking about Wilberforce or the songs that we write and the songs that we sing in the stadiums around this country when we're at football and rugby matches. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and Amazing Grace, and things like that. You can build, the Christian thinking, the Christian language, and this is why I'm so passionate about. Language and speech and voice and technology coming together, is that no matter where you are, there is an opportunity to bring stories of faith into these conversations. And when you do so, it's amazing the responses you get. I've so often, one of the technology talks I give a lot is about kind of predicting the future and how do we predict the future. And I love that verse in 1 Corinthians where Paul talks about this idea of we see through a glass darkly. And he's obviously talking about kind of what we'll see in the future kingdom, but we don't see it yet. But I think that's a great interpretation of what it means to be an innovator, right? And I use that story we currently see a little bit of where technology is going in the future, but we don't see it fully. It's like looking through this dark glass. Yeah. I make the comparisons often to that, to like Black Mirror, the new series that's just come out, right? these kind of two different glasses. And you can use these stories. Jesus uses these stories all the time in his ministry, right? In the 3 years that he was on the earth roaming around and speaking, he basically did two things, which was tell stories and ask questions. Wow. And that's the way in which I approach, the way in which I communicate the work that I do, is I try and tell stories and I try and ask and explore questions with people. And it's through the telling of stories that people can identify themselves in those stories. They can see themselves in those stories. As by asking better questions that people then question their own motive, their own heart, their own ethic. And when they do that, that's what opens them up to the gospel. Wow. I think that's what opens up people's spirits to doing so. So I would say to anyone who's trying to share their faith, It's not about coming in with your testimony red hot. It's not about whacking a Bible verse on the slide. It's just about telling better stories and asking better questions. Because if you tell your story, people will resonate with it. And if you ask them better questions, they'll look for it in themselves.
Wow.
And that's, I think, how we need to do evangelism, discipleship in 2025 and beyond, because we're desperately looking for better stories and everyone has got so many questions.
No, I think that has been, for me, one of the most powerful ways to sum that question up. I've asked that question a number of times to a number of people, but I think that's incredible in terms of how that approach is much needed in this day and age too. So I want to now shift the gear a bit.
Yeah.
And I want to transition to understand, how did you get into then AI? And
I can feel it coming.
About your first speaking event as well. That you're very well known for TED Talk. So can you share some light about that?
Yes. I mean, let's talk about artificial intelligence, shall we? I mean, I don't think, aside from sharing the gospel itself, that there is probably a more important thing to be talking about than talking about AI at this moment in time. And I know that probably sounds hyperbolic, or it sounds like, you're just trying to kind of play into the zeitgeist, but I truly mean it. I think we are about to live through something that is going to be so transformative for human society that we will look back in 5 years' time and will be out of breath thinking about what has happened. And we're only just at the starting point of it now. It's so important. My journey into this space started about 7 years ago, when I was working at the Lego Group. I was leading the emerging platforms and partnerships team there, which is a technology and innovation unit looking at kind of how we would use technology in marketing and communications. And we began to start experimenting with voice assistants, building experiences for Alexa and Google Assistant and for Siri that kids would be able to use to enhance the way in which they play with their Lego bricks. And through that experience, I got fascinated again by this role of technology and communication and audio. It harked back to my radio days. It harked back to my storytelling. And I thought, there's something in this. And so when I left Lego, my co-founder, Jen, and I came together and were both in a similar state and thinking, we think there's something in this, and we think brands are going to really need some help working through what does this new technology paradigm mean. And so we started an agency called Vixen Labs, which was founded to help brands and organizations of all kinds embrace voice technology, because we believe it's one of the most human ways of engaging with technology. Before you learn to tap, type, or swipe, you learn how to speak with one another. And we thought that was where this tech was going to go. Fast forward 5 years from starting that agency, none of us could have foreseen, I think, the explosion that ChatGPT then created. So in November of 2022, ChatGPT from OpenAI comes on the scene. It hits 1 million users in a week, 100 million users in 2 months. It took Netflix over 70 months to do the same thing. And we're now at 500 million users around the world in the space of 2 years with a product called ChatGPT, literally the worst named thing you could think of, with almost zero marketing dollars behind it to get to that level of adoption. And that has obviously spawned a transition and a transformation, not just in the way in which we work, but the way in which we play, the way in which we engage with one another, and will continue to shape the future of what it means to do all of these things into the future from this point forward. And so it's imperative that the church, that Christians, but that all of us as individuals in society engage with, what does this mean? What will this technology do to our relationships, our workplaces, our politics? It will shape all of those things, and we need to critically engage with it. And I want the world to wake up to that, because it's very easy to hear the apocalyptic narratives and get scared of it and then shut it down and not talk about it. Equally, it's easy to get stuck in the fidgeting around and playing with the latest model or widget or gadget or app that does a cool thing and not think about the consequences of where that stuff might go. And we need people to be engaged with it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the question. Is ChatGPT the Antichrist?
No, ChatGPT is not the Antichrist. Far from it. I don't think any of these AI models are evil in any real way, but they are more than just tools. we get this argument all the time that these AIs are just tools. And of course, a tool in the hand of the right person is safe and useful, right? But I often use the example of a chair. This chair I'm sat on is a tool, right? It's a tool made of physics and ergonomics to keep me off the ground. But if I pick this chair up and hit you over the head with it, then it becomes a weapon, right? But worse still is that if I sit somebody on this chair and call it a throne, then we start worshipping the person that sits on it. And that's the danger that I think we sit with when it comes to AI, that we could very soon have something that is so powerful and potentially positioned in such a way that it looks like it will answer all of our life's questions, that we might begin to worship it in a way that we would otherwise do Jesus, or pick your other faith background. And that to me is the real challenge. Or worse, that we worship the people that create it rather than the AI itself, and that's also just as dangerous. So we have to find ways of leveraging all of the good and transformative work that will come from this technology. We absolutely have to learn how to do that, because we won't solve some of the world's biggest problems without doing so. But we have to do that in a way that doesn't wreck our understanding of human sanctity, and particularly from a Christian perspective, the Imago Dei that we see in people, that God made in our, that he makes us in his image-ness. We need to protect that.
Why do Christians get scared of the word of AI?
I think Christians get scared of AI because they think that somehow it's evil. And I don't think that it's evil. But why do they think that AI is evil? They think that AI is evil because it might come and ask or answer questions in a way that is unbiblical. And of course it could do that. It could also answer questions in a way that is entirely biblical if you prompt it the right way. That's why Christians get worried about it. But why do we as society, why do we as humans, long before we're Christians, get worried about intelligence? Well, I think it's because we've used intelligence as the marker, certainly in a humanist sense, to separate ourselves from the animals. We allow animals to be a certain level of intelligent, and there are some that we deem not to be that intelligent, so we eat those ones. And the ones that we deem to be too intelligent, we don't eat. Dogs and cats, and depending on where you are in the world, and dolphins and octopus and things like that. So we use intelligence as this marker to separate us from the animal kingdom. And then we look at intelligence that comes in this artificial form. We don't really know what to do with it, because suddenly it looks like us. It's so close to us, or it can at least act in a way that makes it feel like it's so close to us that it begins to challenge what we really think intelligence actually is. And of course, what it means to be human is far more than what it means to be intelligent. We see forms of intelligence in the animal kingdom, and now obviously artificially, that mimics certain aspects of our own intelligence as humans. But what we believe is that we are more than just intelligence, right? That what makes you a living, breathing, sentient, embodied soul in a body is more than just being intelligent enough to be aware of that, but that you are somehow more than that because you are made in God's image. And that's what sets us apart. But that's what I think we ultimately fear, is that this may somehow become able to be on the same plane, the same level as us, or worse than that, go beyond us. And when it goes beyond us, it goes into a realm that we can't understand, because by very definition, we can't understand it. You can't understand something that's more intelligent than you. It can't, like a monkey can look at us and go, how does make a camera work? It can't understand that. It doesn't have a frame of reference for it. And that's why we fear it, because it's in the unknown. That's the challenge. And we shouldn't fear it, because we believe that there's a better story at play here. But we have to be aware of it for sure. And we certainly have to be engaged and think about how to control it.
Yeah. As a Christian, and as someone that's probably listening who's Christian, what's your advice in terms of providing some assurance or comfort knowing that AI is a safe space?
So I would challenge the question a little bit. I don't think AI is necessarily a safe space. It can be made safer. AI is a tool that, like I say, could be used as a weapon, and if you're not careful, ends up as a throne. So how do we contain it? How do we keep it in that tool space? Well, one is that we have to have great regulation, right? And we're seeing that around the world, that the world is responding at the speed that it is able to respond, which arguably is too slow, but it is responding. We're trying to get regulation right to govern these foundation models, to govern the application layer. But we also then need governance within certain domains. And so within the church, we need governance, right? We need to know what models we should use. We need to know which ones are theologically sound to be used for Christian purposes. We also just need to know which ones are safe to use in the application space, whether that's with young people, whether that's with vulnerable adults, or across language barriers. But more than anything else, we need to know what to do as individuals. Wow. We need to put the seatbelt on ourselves. I often say that, when we were trying to make the roads safer in the 80s in the UK, we did a few different things. We regulated the car manufacturers, which made them put seatbelts in the cars. That helped. But what helped more was putting regulations on the streets. We put 20-mile-an-hour zones in and speed lights and speed cameras, slow people down, right? But people still died in cars because they weren't putting the seatbelt on. And so what we actually did that worked really well was advertising. You would expect me to say that. But the marketing campaigns, those public information campaigns, the Think campaigns of the 80s and 90s were very effective because they showed us what it meant for you as an individual to take responsibility for looking after yourself in the car, put your own seatbelt on. That's what we need individuals to do, and that's what we need Christians to do, is to work out what are these seatbelts, what are these safety measures that we need to be putting on. And so some of those things are things like paying for the models that you use. So you've got a right to remove your data from them or to not train future versions of the model.
Right. That's so important and so incredibly said. What do you think the future holds for AI in the trajectory it's going?
Yeah. So if you think that this stuff has come very, very quickly and is amazingly powerful, then you're right. But what's about to come next, I don't think any of us can quite fathom how different life is going to be as a result. If there are many projections at the moment going around, the AI 2027 document as we record this was released a couple of weeks ago from a number of researchers at OpenAI, or ex-researchers from OpenAI, should I say, and other journalists. There's been counter papers that have also said that the slowdown is going to happen. But whether or not you agree with the different timelines or not, what we can assume is that this technology is only going to get better and better without some intervening force of another global pandemic or some major cyber attack or collapse that takes it all down. But assuming that isn't the case, this is going up and to the right. This is where this stuff is going, both in terms of capability, but also in terms of its involvement in our lives. And so if we know that the future is more of this stuff being ever present around us, then I think we have to start preparing for some of the downstream issues that come from that. When we particularly think about this in the form of AI in society, it probably looks like AI teammates. It probably looks like AI colleagues showing up in workplaces. It probably also means contending with the issue of AI friends and carers. These virtual presences that will look like us, feel like us, sound like us, maybe not be embodied like us to begin with. They'll live in the digital space. But as increasingly we spend so much time in the digital space, it becomes very difficult to determine the difference between a synthetic being and a real one. And that poses all sorts of questions and issues. And that's what we have to get ready for. I want young people across the country to feel that they are better looked after by having a real friend than a synthetic friend. That people who are suffering with mental health issues can go to a real person who can help them with those issues rather than a synthetic one. But it doesn't mean that those AIs can't be helpful in that journey. But we have to get what kind of help that they're going to provide right. And so that when a young person comes to their youth worker or to their teacher or to their, someone at school or a friend or a parent and says, I've fallen in love with this chatbot, what do I do? That parent, teacher, governor, or, kind of social worker has a good answer to that question. And I think for most people, they don't have a good answer to that right now. And so we need to protect for that.
Is there a race between Elon Musk and Sam Altman that you think that's happening? What's your views on either one of those guys?
I mean, I wouldn't want to necessarily comment on the individual people, but there are races to get this stuff right. That is the driving force for why it will get better and why also we've got to be really careful. Whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, Microsoft, Apple, all of these companies are striving to be the best and to be the fastest, and in the future, ultimately the cheapest, because it's the only way that they will become the best and the fastest. Whoever ends up winning that race, I don't think it very much matters at the moment who those individuals are that are running those companies, other than it matters that all of them care about keeping this stuff and making it safe.
Yeah.
We need safe, responsible AI that supports human flourishing. That's what we need to be going after. And paper just this past week from Anthropic, the first major study that they've done into agents, what's called agents in the wild, looking at the ethical principles that are already being exhibited by models like Claude, shows that these models do have ethical principles within them, that they do have an ethical set of judgments that they make and a moral framework by which they operate, one that has mostly arisen through the training data that it has seen and some of the direct controls that have been put in place by those who have instructed the models. It matters to all of us that those models continue to be well managed and that those ethical principles become something that isn't just determined by an individual company, but that we have benchmarks and standards that support these things. And so I particularly would like to see an ethical benchmark that all agents, all models are tested against, and ideally one that supports the standards of human flourishing that's been studied by Harvard and others, and the work that we've been doing with our partners at Glue to think about what a set of standards for human flourishing might look like, I think is a really good way forward, because we need to see a set of benchmarks that these models can be tested against so that we know which of them are there to support the sanctity of human life in the future.
Yeah. And then as you travel a lot, and stateside is a common place where you travel to, and also being in the UK, is there a big paradigm shift between the AI world of those two countries? Are we behind the curve? Are they more far advanced? Have you seen much more difference in the from a geographic location?
Yeah. I mean, the global AI race is hotting up for sure. We should expect that difference to be accentuated over the next couple of years. Certainly, most of these key model makers and the foundation model companies are coming from Silicon Valley, right? That's nothing new. It's a shame because we've had companies, Dennis Hassabis and the team at DeepBrain and Google DeepMind now here in the UK were one of the fundamental model creators, and obviously they've got a big team that's still here. But there is a bit of a paradigm shift that has happened, particularly around compute and access to energy, which the US are leading on now. And I would hope that we, from a UK perspective and European perspective more broadly, not necessarily are able to compete on the model training and making side. I think we probably are already too far down the line to be competitive in that space, maybe with some exceptions around certain use cases. But we certainly can lead on things like ethical judgment. We certainly can lead on safety. And we certainly should be leading on accessibility and digital equity across different markets, and that's where I think from whether that's regulatory perspective or from the application layer, AI in Europe and in the UK can really punch above its weight. We've got an amazing set of resources and talent in this country. We need to know how to invest in it and how to protect it as they grow, and that's I think the real challenge that we've got from a geographic perspective.
Yeah. Any Christian debunks that you come across very commonly in the AI topic space, very well known to you?
The debunking of myths, you mean, or like what do we need to debunk? I think one of the things that we need to debunk as Christians is that this stuff can't be used for Christian purposes. It absolutely can, and it already is. God moves through all things. He works through all things. He's making all things new and bringing all things back to himself, including AI. And we should not be naive to think that somehow these tools cannot be used in the pursuit of the gospel. They absolutely can. We just have to know how to do that well. And so that does mean making sure that the models are aligned with Christian values and Christian standards, that they are truthful and honest in their representation of the Bible. But it also means that we as people in churches and in Christian parachurch organizations and Christian believers need to get better at knowing how to use these things. We can't be late to this. Historically, the church has usually been late or bad about technology, or oftentimes both. And this one is just too important for us to get that wrong again. So I think that's the biggest myth to debunk, is that this technology is here for us to use to reach people of all nations with the gospel. and to see people come back to Christ.
Yeah.
And if we choose not to use it, then I think that we're leaving a massive opportunity on the table.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very, very important point you've made, which is even though it has its myths and from a Christian perspective, but it can be used for good, for promoting the
Absolutely.
gospel. I've seen it firsthand with a well-known global pastor that I know is using it to turn his English vocabulary into Spanish, Portuguese. And again, that's reaching those demographics of audiences.
Exactly.
How do you feel about the church currently embracing AI? Do you think it should be more encouraged? Have you seen it now currently in play in a lot more churches? Just give us a taster in terms of, your scene on the Christian unit.
We're seeing people across both churches and also Christian non-profits and parachurch organizations embracing AI at probably the fastest rate I've seen them embrace any technology previously. Certainly if you compare it to the web, to live streaming, and certainly to social media, the interest in it and the adoption of it is far outstripping what we've seen previously. But one of the biggest things that it's doing is unlocking time for people. AI is a time machine. It gives you back so much time if you know how to use it well. And so it's taking the administration out of ministry. That's what I'd love to see more of. The administrative burden of running a ministry, a modern ministry in the context, whether it's in the US or here in Europe, is huge right now. And we've got more and more people that need to run ministries with fewer teams, with less resources. And so if this means that AI can give people back that time, that effort, that extra 20-30% of their week back, so it means they can go out and reach more people, I think this is the most amazing opportunity for us to do so. Yeah. And yet we have to make sure that people use it well. And so it's trying to find that balance. But I think Christians are thinking about this stuff critically. I'm glad to say that there are people around the world embracing it. And we'll see them do more. We all see them do more.
And just on we'll see more, what does more look like for JP? What's coming up in the future? Yeah. What are you working on? What are you passionate about? And what do you want to see change?
Yeah. So I'm really passionate about this world of ethics and morals and standards when it comes to AI. And so over the next year, I'm working with a number of partners at Biola University in the US, in California, as well as Glue in Colorado, and partners around the world to help try and bring together groups of Christians in different settings to both build, but also to regulate and to benchmark these AI models to make sure that they're safe for us to support human flourishing in the future and protect that Imago Dei sanctity that we have as humans. And on a personal note, I'm thinking deeply about what does the next decade look like in terms of AI from our family life, from our educational perspective, and from what it means to work and have kind of a society that functions still and functions well and isn't one that's just surviving as AI takes over, but is thriving and using it. And so that's what I'm focused on over the next 12 months.
Oh, that's fantastic. And look, I know you're not here by accident, and for a purpose and a reason. And I know that even with technology moving its time, your faith is moving with you. So for that, we've coming to almost to the end of this segment, and what you've shared today, I think, will help many people, and especially instill more confidence rather than fear in this space of technology and AI, and people like yourself pioneering the space from a Christian perspective too, and really lead the way to show that it's meant for good, not for harm.
That's right.
So we're coming almost to the end of this segment, JP, and I want to really always give everyone an opportunity for 7 quick rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And these are just questions that we'll go through, all about just yourself and others, and very quickly just share that with us. So if you're ready for the 7 quick rapid fire questions, we can start.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
Good. First one, which is favorite takeaway.
Chinese, crispy chili chicken, something like that, probably.
Favorite sports team, or if not, fashion brand if you don't have a sports team.
Here in the UK, it's the London Lions, London's basketball team. Go Lions! And in the US, it's the New York Knicks. I'm afraid I'm a basketball guy through and through.
What's one thing that JP likes to do in his downtime?
Watch Formula One. As much Formula One content as I can possibly get.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee all the time.
If you was to meet Jesus, what would be the first question you'd ask him?
What is it with the wasps, man? Like, why have we got wasps? Like, this seems to be like a real bug in the system, quite literally.
What's one app that you can use and not live without, except the Bible app?
This app on my computer called Whisperflow has changed my life the past couple of weeks. It's a dictation app. You press one button, you talk to it, and suddenly it's writing everything down for you. It's amazing.
One piece of advice that you'll give to a leader.
Know how to use AI to change the way in which you lead.
What's the boldest decision you've ever made?
Starting a company and then selling it.
And last but not least, one message you leave for our audience today.
Make bold decisions. Make bold decisions. So often we sit with things and we do things half-heartedly, or we wait longer than we should. Be bold and courageous. That's what God said to Joshua as he took over from Moses. I love in my favorite verse in the Bible. This is not the quickfire version, but my favorite verse in the Bible is the start of Joshua, which is, "And so Moses was dead." And that's a weird verse. But what it leads to is Joshua getting this opportunity to come in and lead behind Moses. And he says to him, be bold and very courageous. And he tells him over and over again. And that, to me, I think, is the thing that we all need to be better at.
That's fantastic and summed up very perfectly. I'm going to add one more question, but not a part of it. But if you was in a room with Elon Musk or even Sam Altman and one of the leading guys that we know in the industry in AI space, what would you do?
I'd go to any one of those guys leading these models and say, how can we bring the perspective of Jesus and the global church into the training of these future models so that they protect human sanctity in the future?
Wow.
That's what I would do.
Fantastic. JP, it's been an honor. Again, thank you so much for
my
your
pleasure.
time. I definitely think there'll be a part 2 to this at some point in the future. But
Count me in.
please do keep up the great work, and thank you for being just open, transparent, and I would like to say pioneering the space from
Thanks.
Christendom of technology and AI merged together. So again,
Appreciate it.
thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Joel.
Pleasure.